one, the only, Willie Bermudez.
Make some
Welcome to the official WB podcast. COVID may have slowed us down, but we cannot be stopped. Willie Bermudez with you, and I want to start things off on a topic that's so important because it affects so many people. So joining me on the show is Dr. K. Rubin, mental health professional, relationship expert, master of the mind. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I'm so happy you're here. We need you.
I'm happy to be here.
The world needs you. There's so many things that are wrong with the world. We need you. So, first of all, tell me how you embarked upon this mental health profession journey.
I was fascinated by the field of psychology. My parents would always tell me no, and I'd always want to find the answer. How to turn the no into a yes. And they said, "You're such a psychologist."
Really?
And the seed was planted. So that's what happened. But, being the oldest of four, you're always helping, right? And to me, I found the field of psychology fascinating because you can engage in behavior modification. You can help people change their mindset and help them change their circumstances. So when people are feeling stuck, this is what I love about it, is that you get to see that help them make the trajectory of change that they're looking for.
Right. So you would say that is what is most gratifying to you.
That is what's most gratifying. And seeing clients being empowered over their own life and their own problems and managing them better when we first started, and seeing that growth in them is the most gratifying thing that you can see.
Okay. So let me ask you something that's very near and dear to my heart, right?
Okay.
I battle depression.
Okay.
But not on an extreme level, I would say.
Okay.
Or not on a level that's so significant, right? Where I would make the choice to no longer be here, right? Not here. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
But my question is, how widespread is depression?
It's very widespread. It's very common. I mean, there's a whole continuum. You can go from experiencing a state of depression, right? I got the blues just for today, and then I'm good tomorrow. Right. It could be a moment thing. It could be a response to an environmental stressor. You're in a job that you don't like. You're changing a relationship. The pandemic, for example. It changed our whole reality, right? And then some people are living with depression. They're diagnosed with a depressive disorder, or they're diagnosed with bipolar depression too. So those are people that are learning to manage the depression. Although they're living with this condition, they're learning to manage it.
Yeah, for me, I'll tell you, it's important for me that if I'm going to, host my own podcast, that I be transparent,
Of course.
And never play the role of just an outsider all the time, right? So if I could contribute, in some way I will. For me, what makes me happy is when I have a lot of projects, right? Yeah. To engage in.
It gives you purpose.
Right. I've noticed that when I don't have projects to work on, that's when I'm in my worst, right?
Yeah.
That's when I feel without purpose.
Yeah.
Something's missing. Why am I here? You question your own existence, actually.
It's common.
Right.
It's common. Finding your purpose and engaging in things that you find fulfilling is the greatest way for you to manage your mental health, to induce natural ways of happiness, right? So they say when you are engaged in things that inspire you, right? That's the greatest way to maintain a level of happiness and to combat depression.
You see, I needed a professional to tell me that, because I was like, it's so strange, man. When I have projects, I'm happy. When I don't have,
because it gives you a purpose. What about those projects do you find fulfilling?
Yeah. I think for me, it's the creativity part, right? Creating the concepts.
Yeah.
Trying to see them through, and then just being part of like the process, right? Like the waiting, the working, but the waiting,
Absolutely. And then you get the end product, which is the impact.
Yeah. So is it normal then for people that question their existence and their purpose to not ever, of course, commit suicide, but think about it? How normal is it to think about checking out?
It's pretty normal. I mean, it's called a fleeting thought. We have those thoughts because it's a form of escapism. I don't like what's happening right now. I don't want to be in this situation right now. I wish I wasn't here. does not necessarily mean I'm ready to commit suicide. That's where a therapist comes into play and does a suicide risk assessment. Mm-hmm. And then we create a safety plan.
And then how does that work? Is it a series of questions?
It's a series of questions to check out to see, is it a fleeting thought? Do they have a plan? If they had a plan, how would they go through with it? And then at the same time, you're also creating measures to promote their safety. And then you're also at the same time, you have a plan of people that they're supposed to contact and also who you are going to contact also as the mental health professional to make sure that they're safe. Mm. Sometimes it might be a Baker Act, sometimes it might not. It just depends on the case.
Right. Yeah, I think that what keeps people going is when you think about the people that love you, the people that you love, how they would be impacted, destroyed, you know what I mean? Like if you were to essentially check out, and that helps, you know what I mean?
I mean, everyone is going to be different, but that might be one thing that does help, because when you're in a state of despair at that level, you're forgetting about everything else and everyone else. You're just like, in this box, it's me and me.
Right. And do you notice that with depression, it affects people at a younger age or older? Or is it just completely...
It doesn't discriminate.
It doesn't discriminate.
It doesn't discriminate.
Dr. K, so let me ask you. So what are some of the kinds of things that you offer your clients to manage depression?
Some of the things that I do offer, number one, is I ask them when their depression is not there. Because
when it's not there. That's a good question.
Not there, because people think I need to get rid of it. Well, it's a common form, it's common, right? But when is it not there? And building up those circumstances. Right? So for you, it's not there when you got purpose, right?
Right.
Another thing also is, to ask the clients, are they on medication? Have they been evaluated? Depending on how their depression affects them. Because if it's a biochemical imbalance, then it's going to be twofold. You need to be on the medication to straighten the physiological aspect of the depression. And then they can also benefit from the coping skills, right? The other thing is, so we build up, coping skills on, when it's not there to reinforce, positive mood. At the same time, a lot of clients, self-esteem is impacting their depression. I had a client that, was been unemployed, couldn't find a job, and, is educated, and it was affecting her self-esteem and self-worth. So,
no purpose.
That too. So sometimes it's a matter of, when people are in a depressed state because of what's going on around them, they start catastrophizing. So we need to start normalizing their thoughts, right? And make them more growth oriented instead of where they feel fixed, like there's nothing I can do at this point, and it's only going to get worse. So you get an opportunity through your questioning and your dialogue with the clients to have them see for themselves that there is opportunity, that they are catastrophizing. And then at the same time, I had with one client building her self-esteem. I said, what do you like about yourself? I don't know. What have people told you? Okay, so she made a list. And I said, okay, for this week, I want you to go out and do each item from the list and then tell me how you feel. So she said, she got to exercise 2 of those qualities, showing that she was knowledgeable at work and being fun at work, right? So she got a chance to see that, I can make my life better. But I think the best exercise I have given every client, regardless of the circumstance, is I have them draw a circle and I have them put dots in the middle. And I say the circle is your life. These dots are moments in your life. How long does a moment last? Very short. So it could last very long. Could be a bad moment, but you could also have a good moment.
Right.
So it gives them a sense of hope. So that's just a combination of things I do, but with every client, it's going to be customized. It's going to be collaborative. But those are some of the general things that I have found to be helpful.
And what do you say to people that are anti-medication, right? So somebody should be going on some prescription for their mental health, but they just resist it because they say that it may make them too dependent, perhaps make everything worse.
I think those are relevant concerns. The first thing you have to do is you've got to respect your client's space and their position, right? And because you don't want to have a tug of war. You're their ally in a way, right?
Right.
The second thing is to educate them. How does medication work? Why would medication be appropriate? It's something for you to consider. You don't have to consider it, but here are the benefits, and this is what the researchers said. This is how the medication works. Are there side effects? Of course there are side effects. Is there a way to have the right combination of medication prescribed that that will fit well for you? Yeah, it might be trial and error, it might not, but you don't know unless you go forward. But that's generally my approach with them.
Okay.
But my focus also is to give them the tools so that they can manage their life and whatever their current issue is.
So when someone visits you, and the issue at hand is depression, is that a private thing, or how often?
What do you mean by private?
Like the family, how important is it for the family to sort of be supportive in the process of them getting help, or is it just a private thing? If somebody doesn't want anybody to know?
It depends on the client. It really depends on the client. I have a mother dealing with depression, on my caseload, and she has a close relationship with her daughter. So I give the mom homework assignments, and she discusses the homework assignments with her daughter.
Right.
And the daughter is her cheerleader, and her husband is her cheerleader. So then I maximize that resource for her in maintaining mental health, which is you've got a natural support system.
And that, I think, is very important.
It's very important.
Because part of that darkness for some people, I think it's maybe they don't have anyone, or they think they don't have anyone, or people have been alienated for one reason or another. And part of the feeling of alone is compounded by all these negative feelings,
It can be. And there's also a sense of, for some people, it could also be a sense of shame. I shouldn't be feeling this way.
Yeah, it's not normal.
It's not normal.
I'm not normal.
I'm not normal.
Right.
And then when they make the step to go to therapy, and you're like, this is normal. It's just uncomfortable, and I can help you with the tools to find a way to keep it at a balance for you that's a comfortable level.
But I think that we've gotten to the place in history and time and space and everything that we could agree that what is normal, right? Who's normal?
It's all relative.
Right, it's all relative.
It's all relative.
No such thing as normal.
But what's comfortable for you, meaning the client, is that's what our goal is.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's momentarily switch gears to something a little more lighthearted. Okay. Depression is very important. But we know that the downside of that is very grave,
Yeah.
and should be taken serious. But I want to ask you, relationships. Why are relationships so difficult? And I know it's a loaded question, but
it is a loaded question.
Just generally.
But if you think of the word relationship, the key word there is relate, right? So we're not a carbon copy. We're not interacting with other people that are a carbon copy of ourselves, right? So that's the key thing, right? So do we have the same values? Do we have the similar communication style, goals? Are personalities complementary? Some personalities are not complementary, and we've got those wonderful expressions, not my cup of tea. Right? Yeah. That's a great person, but they're not my cup of tea. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we meet somebody, we're attracted to them, right?
Yes.
Physically or otherwise. Usually it's physically. And we want to go forward.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the way, we figure out at some point that something isn't working, but yet we sort of push it aside and we lunge forward anyway. And I know I've done that.
Yeah.
So that's happened to me. I know it's happened, probably most people I know. But it's something we do, right? It's like we know that myself and this person aren't compatible.
Yeah.
But we continue to try despite fighting, despite arguing, despite, issues,
Well, I mean, one of the things is when oxytocin is released, right? It's a hormone, right? It's the bonding hormone, right?
Is it?
Yeah.
Tell us about it. I'm not familiar with that hormone.
It's a hormone, right? So when oxytocin is released, right, it makes you feel even more connected. It's the explanation when you were just with your significant other and they just drove off because the date was over. You're like, I miss them, but why do I feel so crazy? Oxytocin.
I've never heard of that. That's interesting. So that's
one part is the hormonal connection.
right. So it's like a joy that you get when you're sharing, right, with another person.
When you're bonding.
Right, that you like or you love.
When you're even,
right.
I mean, parent to child is a great
Oh,
example.
okay.
I mean, you know, you hear a parent, oh, my kids are driving me crazy. And then their kids are off to camp. I miss them. And they've only left like 10 minutes ago. And you're like, what's wrong with you? You know, welcome to oxytocin.
So that's what that is.
The bonding hormone.
Where can I buy some of that? You know? Kidding. Nah, you know what? It's a great feeling, you know, like when you get into a relationship, you know, and then you feel like you have that person that misses you and they ask about you and they support you and things. But again, there is those times where it just starts to fall apart.
It does
6 months, it could be a year, it just falls apart. And you try and you try and you try not to argue, but it just doesn't.
Well, here's the thing.
You know?
The more you try to stop something, the more it persists, right? What you resist persists, right? So it's important to put the cards on the table, right? So one of the questions you ask is, why do we still move forward? Well, because there's still things that we like and
it's hope, right?
about
And it's hope.
It's hope.
Because we're made of hope.
And we also have an attraction to the things that we adore about them, where we feel connected to those things. We're not ready to sever that connection. You know, there's, 80% I like, but this 20% is driving me crazy. You know, what do I do? You know, do I work out this 20%? Or do I realize, you know what, this is a non-negotiable for me? So it comes down to personal values. You know, is this person in line with my personal values or not?
Right.
And if they're not, are there areas of flexibility to help us work things out? And are those areas of flexibility something that I'm comfortable with and I can do graciously where I'm not resenting it later? Because if you're just doing it to keep the relationship and it's not something you're comfortable with, it's going to fall apart again.
Yeah. And like, how many people stop being their true selves just to be in that relationship, right?
It really
that happens a lot.
It can happen. But the other thing also what happens is that, sometimes people in relationships stop doing the things that they were doing that kept the relationship at its highest levels. I see couples, right? And one of the couples was at a low point. And I said, when was the last time you guys were happy together? And it was exciting to be together. He said, when we were in college. I said, well, what was going on? They said, well, we were having fun. We were doing fun things. We were communicating about everything. There was trust. I said, okay, out of all those three things, what's happening right now? Any of them? They said, no.
Oh, man.
So we had to rebuild. And that's what we did. So we talked about it, gave them exercises to reinforce those components, and the relationship got better, right? But relationships do have highs and lows. But the important thing is when there's a low, that there's a repair effort, right? So that, both parties or whoever, is slacking or committed the infraction that hurt the other partner, they're owning it and they're discussing about how, they can repair and move forward and grow and thrive.
Yeah. You know that based on that, when I think about the relationships I've had, right?
Yeah.
That I've only had a few, but the relationships I've had, I could think sort of about one that I remember where it did come up in a conversation about going to, relationship counseling, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that people have a hard time pulling the trigger on. It's almost like, I don't want to say shame or you're sort of embarrassed, but I know that that's tough for people, right?
It can be.
To do that, to make that decision.
Yeah, it can be because, mental health is having less and less of a stigma. Now it's like everyone, well, have you spoken to your therapist? My therapist, right? So now it's becoming a little bit more of a normalized conversation. Right. But, it can be hard to say, we're going to a therapist because the first question is, what's wrong? Right? Instead of saying, oh, well, that's really great. You're taking measures to, maintain mental health and have optimal relationships. You know?
Yeah. I mean, in my, humble, experience, I think that I got to a place where definitely, counseling helps. But I think that there's two people that they just can't make it because they're too different, Somebody is too passive or not passive enough. The other person's too aggressive in their demeanor, and so they overpower the other person. So I think that you need the person that's less and the one that's a little more. But you can't have two people that are more or two people that are less.
It just really depends. I mean, there are unhealthy patterns, right? So
Right.
if one is very dominant and the other one is more passive, eventually the passive person is like, I'm not having enough, right?
Right.
And they're upset. But it's very important as a therapist to make them aware of the unhealthy pattern that they're in, right? And what they can do differently. So, you can give them the tools and what they do with the tools and see what happens. And you're monitoring their progress, and you're talking about the themes that happen where they have gridlock, and they're like, we can't resolve this.
Right.
How do you approach that? It might be a matter of acceptance. It might be a matter of just looking at the situation differently, responding to the situation differently.
But what about, sort of measuring, right? Just, time that's spent positive versus negative.
Well, that's very important. It's relationships that are healthy have a higher positive ratio to negative ratio of interactions than negative. Right?
Yeah, because if you're always fighting,
fighting, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that there are relationships where if you're within the household, right, everything's perfect, quote unquote. But the second you step out, there's always problems. There's arguments, right? There's, it could be jealousy related, like it could be just, whatever. But I've seen that. And I've seen that, maybe even a couple of my relationships, but I've seen it in a few people that I know. And they tell me, Will, when we're home, everything's fine.
Well,
the second we step out, that's it. Right. So the controlled environment works.
It's a controlled, predictable environment. But no, I mean, I would say that there's, a trust issue in a situation like that. How do you build trust, right? It depends on the clients, what would they like their relationship to look like? It's not what I want it to look like. I can give, ideas of what like a healthy relationship looks like, but what would you like your relationship to look like? Right. And then like on a scale of 1 to 10, where is it? And why is it at that number? Right. What would make the difference to bring it to the next number, which gives them a chance to look at changes small and incremental. Right. But even if one person does something different in a relationship, it changes the whole dynamic. So, for example, I had one couple, the reason their bad dynamic is he's very critical and she doesn't take accountability. So the more she doesn't take accountability, the more critical he becomes. The more critical he becomes, the less accountability she takes.
Wow.
Right? So I said, okay, why don't we just switch this up? Why don't you take on being empathic to the husband that was critical, right? Go in with the role of trying to understand and being curious. And to the wife, I said, why don't you take on the role of, being accountable, acknowledging, because you're not in trouble like a kid. Just let's see what happens for a week. They started playing dodgeball in their house. Okay. All of a sudden, this couple
that sounds fun, actually.
Yeah. All of a sudden, this couple that didn't like each other is now having fun in their relationship. Right? They're enjoying taking their daughter out. They're
dodgeball.
Engaged.
I would have never thought of that. Dodgeball.
Yeah, dodgeball in the house. 2 adults. But the point is that when you do something different, it changes the dynamic.
Yeah.
And you can change a dynamic to a positive or negative as long as the person is open and committed to doing something different.
So if you want to fix it, dodgeball.
One way.
I would have never thought of that, but you know what?
But that was their thing.
And it worked.
And it worked.
And it worked, yeah.
And I let them take the reins. And it was interesting in that conversation. I said, how did you make that happen? You guys, I couldn't even get you guys to do date night. Now you got dodgeball, which is like great because it's like a ritual of connection for them, something to look forward to, right?
Wow.
Even though it's not a formal date. And the wife said to me, we learned to be mindful. And I never planted that word. That was something they came up with. So it was really interesting that they empowered themselves.
Right. Yeah, it's like they figured it out. They had fun. And they're like, wait a minute, this was missing. And now it's not.
No, it's not.
And it's helping,
Yeah. So, I mean, as a therapist, you give them the general tools. Right. You get them to think about things they're not thinking about by the questions that you ask them. Right? So you're planting seeds and then they're taking off with it.
That is what I'm talking about. Dodgeball in relationships. And that's what every couple out there in America and in the UK and everywhere else, that's what people need. Dodgeball. Oh man. Doctor, we have to take a break.
Okay.
Ya regresamos. This is the official WB podcast. Remember that you are loved. If you are feeling suicidal, thinking about hurting yourself, or are concerned that someone you know may be in danger of hurting himself or herself, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. It is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it is staffed by certified crisis response professionals. Your place in this world matters.
You are tuning in to the Willie Bermudez podcast.
Doing it right.
Estás sintonizado en el programa oficial de Willie Bermudez.
Here, we discuss world topics, business, and positive living.
Los temas más interesantes cada semana con Willie.
Fazer o que está certo com Willie Bermudez. Agora.
Willie Bermudez back with you, and I'm here with Dr. K. Rubin, mental health professional, relationship therapist. And we're discussing those things that are so important to our lives, relationships, otherwise our psyche. Doctor.
Yes.
We talked about all these very important things, but I failed to ask you the biggest founding component, communication.
Yes.
Tell me about communication.
Communication. Where do I begin? I mean, what I found is that with communication, it's so easy to have miscommunication, right?
Yeah.
Because everyone's language is about things differently.
Especially texting, right?
Especially texting.
Yeah, we don't want to text if we want to be understood, right?
I always tell people, use texting for logistics. I'm running 5 minutes late. We're meeting here. Anything more than like 2 lines, that needs to have a conversation on the phone or face to face, right?
Yep.
So that's number one. But I mean, other things is, people think they're being clear, right? But what people need to realize is what's being said. Here are the words. There's 2 different people interpreting it, right? So for example, with one couple that they're working on reconciling, right? She says, I want to feel valued in this relationship, right? And here the husband, basically declined taking on another business opportunity. He's very career focused, right? Right. So she's like, I'm waiting for this grand gesture. And he's like, well, I just, canceled, going forward with another business, which would have given us a more prosperous life. She goes, well, I didn't recognize that as a gesture.
Ladies, you got to notice these things. Ladies, what's going on with you? You got to understand when we're making little sacrifices.
So here's the thing. I said, well, listen, if you're not clear, he's not going to know. If being valued means, fluff my pillows, give me a good morning hug, give me a good afternoon text, and you tell him that, then he's going to know, right? But you're not on the same page. So both parties have to be very clear, right? So it's very important. Sometimes, people say, they fly off the handle, right? Someone says this and they fly off the handle. Stop and ask, what do you mean when you say that? Because I'm hearing this, right? So, I mean, it's so easy to because sometimes with communication, conflicts that are this small become this big. Because we're not speaking clearly to each other, right? And there's sometimes, words that just set people off. Like, one partner thinks that they're being collaborative and helpful, right? To the other partner and say, you should really think about doing it this way. Or you should, ask your boss this, right? They're thinking they're being helpful. They don't understand why their partner is being angry at them. Because what the partner is hearing is, you're correcting me. You don't think I'm doing a good enough job, and you don't trust my ability to do this independently. Right. If you're looking for collaboration, use words like, I was wondering, I was curious, that way it inspires a more collaborative conversation, right? So, communication is very important to be clear, know your audience and use words that inspire their attention, to collaborate with you. So those are some very important things. Other things that come up is, values and priorities,
Priorities, that's a big one.
That's a big one. So, there's something called sliding versus deciding, right? So some people just slide into relationships because, hey, we've got this social clock that says, by 30, 35, the latest, you should be married and you should pop out some kids. And then you'll live happily ever after in this house with a white picket fence and your 2 dogs and your 2.5 kids. Yep. Right?
Yeah, so they accelerate that process.
So they accelerate it and they're not thinking what they're getting into. Meaning, these are my values. Does this partner line up with my values? These are my goals. Does this partner line up with my goals? You know, I'm planning on having a career that takes me around the world, but maybe your partner's not on that page. That might not be the right partner for you.
Right.
I'm planning on having kids. I don't think I want kids. That's an important discussion.
Listen,
You know,
that's a big one because that happens often.
yeah,
People make a consensus early on, but then that could change. The person that said that we're okay with not having kids suddenly doesn't feel that way anymore. And now they want to have kids, and that changes everything then.
That changes. So it's really important to know what your values are and what your priorities are. Now, some values, you know, can be compatible with others and some might not. And that's for the couple to decide. At the same time, like, you know, some people value career and then family second. Some people are family first, career second, right? So now they're in this marriage together and the fight is we don't get enough quality time. Well, I'm providing. My career is important to me. It's my passion. Yeah, but, you know, we signed up to be a family. We don't get to see you. So it's an incompatibility. But at the same time, is there an area of flexibility? What is the area of flexibility? What days could you give? What times of the day? You know, how can you touch base and have connection with each other so that this spouse feels like they're getting the quality family time and you're also getting the time to devote to your career, which you find inspiring.
Yes.
And that's just with any issue, you know?
And how often do you see that priorities sort of shift in relationships? Is it that they shift or is it that the people were, you know, like we're always sort of that way?
In my experience, it can be both. With one of the couples that I'm seeing now, it's that way, where it was that way from the beginning, but they weren't really talking. They were just going through the trajectory of the social clock without really thinking about these milestones. So now they're going backwards in the sense of, not backwards, they're revisiting, right? So they're revisiting, okay, well, what are our values? What are our goals? Are we in alignment? We're not in alignment here. Where is the area of flexibility? So that's what, you know, we talk about in session and that's what they go out and figure out outside of session. And then we talk again, you know, so they're getting the hang of making more informed decisions. But I mean, priorities can change just like life changes, right. You know, the pandemic brought great awareness to us of reinstating priorities that we didn't think were priorities, you know? So the answer is it depends. Depends on the situation, depends on the person.
People, of course.
It depends.
Right. Well, I think I have a final question, and I don't think it depends. All right. Okay. So I think that this is the one that's a deal breaker. This is the one
go for
that affects everything, every inch, no pun intended, but every inch of a relationship. Okay. How important is sex in a relationship?
It's important.
How important? How important are we talking about?
It depends on the couple. It depends on the couple.
Yeah, that's true.
It depends on the couple. But I will tell you this, on a research study that I saw, they were looking at couples married 50 plus years. And they had, yes.
People still having sex after 50 years?
Yes. but here's the thing. Here's the thing. They asked them what was the number one factor that was the glue for their relationship, the success of their relationship. And it wasn't sex. It was, you ready for this?
Intimacy.
Yes. They saw their spouse as their best friend. So they were connecting on multiple levels, right? So that's also, sex is important, right?
Yeah, it is.
It's part of connection.
No, it is. It is.
You know? It is. But also if you're not having intimacy in other areas and you're not having connection in other levels, in other areas, it's going to affect the sex life.
Yeah.
So it goes hand in hand.
And compatibility. Not everybody's compatible.
Not everybody is. I mean, for some people, they can find compatibility within the areas of flexibility, and some people cannot, right? So,
flexibility, man. All these words are like no pun intended, but it's like a crazy.
And it's important for people to be aware of their deal breakers. You know? Yeah. So
well, but that's one that you can't really. I mean, you could discuss it beforehand, right? Yeah. But that's one of the things that even if you talk about it, you won't know until you get there. So, you know?
Well, that's what they call dating, right?
Yeah.
Dating is like the test drive.
Test drive. Try it out if it works out.
Try it out. I mean, listen, not everything turns into a relationship.
No, it doesn't. No, absolutely.
You've got 1 date, 2 dates, 3 dates, and sometimes it's
of course. Listen, I would tell you that most of the people, or at least most people I know, we've probably had more failures, quote unquote failures.
Yeah.
Which in a way, nothing's a failure because you learn, right?
Yeah.
But we've probably had more failures than we've had successes when it comes to dating, relationship. Because it's true, you meet somebody and something is off. Something like you just can't get there. It could be sex or not, right? Like it could be, it could be
anything.
Anything. Yeah, anything. Yeah.
Anything.
Yeah.
The person doesn't fit. It's not the right combination. Right. They don't fit with your life vision.
Yeah.
They don't fit with your values. It's a lot of different things. I mean, even for my clients that are dating, when we talk about, they want a relationship or they're in a relationship, they're not happy with it. We talk about what are the good parts? Is it healthy? What does a healthy relationship look like? I tell one of my clients, she was in despair when I got her in January.
Despair, like she had a
depression, like just a sense of despair.
Oh, I thought that she was in despair because
No.
Oh, okay.
I mean, one of the things is that we worked on bringing her self-esteem, identifying her values, and then she ended up attracting a boyfriend that is in line with her values, and the relationship's healthy. So, I mean, I also see my job as a therapist to also provide psychoeducation to my clients on what healthy relationships look like and how they can contribute to healthy relationships and what to do when they're not in a healthy relationship.
Yeah. Yes.
It's key. Maintenance is the key.
Maintenance is the key. But you know what? Overall, the advice I give everybody, is always just be happy. Yeah. At the end of the day, people got to be happy. People got to figure out how to be happy. Whatever that means. If it's by yourself, if it's a specific type of partner, if it's what you do with your dodgeball,
Yeah, dodgeball.
You know what I mean?
But that's the key, because when people have to focus on the way they're being, because how you're being affects what you're doing, and what you're doing affects what you're getting, right? So if you want to know how you're being, look at what you're getting, right? It's a reflection. What
you're doing affects what you're getting.
Now I know how you're being.
How you're being affects
what you're getting because it's influencing what you're doing.
I like that. It's a cool, Facebook quote. Social media, quick hit.
I better get reference for that.
You will. No, that's good. That's good. Dr. K, what can I say? I appreciate you being here.
I appreciate having the opportunity to be here.
It's been a pleasure. And you're going to be here more often because I'm going to need you.
I'm happy to be here.
For a lot of the topics that I plan on conquering.
I'm happy to be here. It was a lot of fun having this discussion. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And where can people find you? Probably an email address. Is there an email address you can share?
Yes. Wants to talk with you? At krubin@advancedclientcare.org.
Okay. Got it. So anybody who's interested, speaking with you, perhaps becoming your patient, client,
Absolutely.
They could contact you. Thank you so much. And our friends, that is our time. Thank you for joining me, Dr. Rubin, Dr. K, because I like how that sounds already. All right. On the official WB podcast. Tune in every week for a new episode and connect with us anytime on any social media platform and WillieBermudez.com. Have a great one and don't text and drive. Subscribe to watch new episodes, be a guest, or advertise on the Willie Bermudez podcast by visiting WillieBermudez.com and listen via audio on all major podcast platforms.